So Belal Muhammad is now our current new UFC welterweight champion. And I'll say it, I'll admit it. I did not predict Belal to even become champion. So congrats to Belal Muhammad. He definitely earned this, put on a good winning streak and dominated Leon Edwards. However, let's be real here. A lot of people don't want to see Belal as champ, including me. He definitely doesn't carry a lot of excitements into his fights. He has one of the most boring styles in the UFC. And I think the UFC does not want Belal to be champion for a long period of time. They even had a hard time giving Belal a championship title fight. So I don't think they're going to want to put all of their chips into the basket of Belal Muhammad and watch him have a GOAT reign. So my prediction is that the UFC is going to find whatever contender they can muster up, any fighter currently right now, and try to get Belal on a quick turnaround to lose his belt in his next fight. So I think Belal yet again is going to have to prove a lot of people wrong in trying to maintain or have a good championship reign. But you might be asking me, who are these fighters? Who do the UFC want to replace Belal Muhammad? And so I began getting into the lab. I began thinking, and I came to the conclusion that these 5 fighters have the best chance of beating Belal Muhammad. And I think the UFC would not mind them being champion over Belal Muhammad. So I'm going to rank these 5 fighters based on their chances of beating Belal Muhammad. Now, do I believe that all 5 of these fighters will beat Belal Muhammad? No, but I think they have a good, solid chance of beating him somewhere down the line. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time and let's get right into these rankings. So as you can see to my right, we do have the current champion Belal Muhammad. I'm going to unveil each fighter one by one and give you my reasoning and my take on how they can beat Belal Muhammad, or if they can even beat Belal Muhammad. So we'll go ahead and kick this right off, and we'll start with Leon Edwards. Now listen to me real quick. I know Edwards just lost dominantly to Belal Muhammad. However, I think somewhere down the line, maybe in the future, Leon Edwards still does have a good chance of beating Belal Muhammad. Now listen, Belal Muhammad is currently 36 years old. He's on the tail end of his UFC career, and Leon Edwards is only 32. Now, when you do math here, with Belal being towards the end of his prime years, I don't think he's going to hold the belt for years upon years upon years. And I think someone has to take that belt from him. And with Leon still being in his prime right now, I think maybe in a couple years, at most a couple years, I think Leon can work himself back to the title picture, and eventually we might see Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 3, and maybe with Belal being like 37, 38, maybe even 39, and Leon Edwards only being like 34, 35, we might see a better version of Edwards, or just the same version of Edwards and a worse version of Belal. And if that's the case, I do think Edwards' style can get one done over Belal. Now, this happens like tomorrow or like next year. I don't see Edwards beating Belal, but in the future, as time goes on, maybe there's an outside chance we do see this rematch. And I think if it is an older version of Belal, I do think Leon can get it done. But as of right now, again, he just lost dominantly to Belal. I don't see him beating him in a rematch if he only fights 1 or 2 more opponents in the meantime. Let's say Leon fights Ian Gary. Maybe that fight takes place in December, November. Edwards wins, and then he gets a rematch in like 6 months versus Belal. I don't see Edwards beating Belal. However, maybe in a couple years' time and a rematch ends up happening, maybe Edwards can get his loss back over Belal and get it done and get that championship belt back. Now, if I had to bet on that, I am not taking that bet whatsoever. I do think Edwards has, out of the top 5 guys in this list, he has the worst chance of beating Belal because he did lose so dominantly. He needs to fix his mindset a little bit. I felt like he was kind of giving up after the first round versus Belal. So I think if Edwards can, I guess, get a dog in him at some point in his career, maybe he can come out there and make that last 10 seconds of their fight actually mean something and do it in the first round and probably finish Belal. But if Edwards stays the same and he just kind of just backs up the entire time versus Belal, I don't see a chance in hell he beats him. But if he can fix his style and make the correct reads and just overall have a better performance than what he did against Belal in their second fight, then maybe he can have a chance of beating him in the future. But that's it with Leon. We move on to our 4th fighter on the list, and that is Colby Covington. Now, Colby Covington, I really don't see beating Belal anytime soon, but if I had to compare styles, I do think Colby Covington has a decent style to beat Belal Muhammad. Let's be real here. This is kind of a mirror matchup in some ways, and maybe we can say that Colby Covington has a better style. Maybe his style is more effective versus Belal, a guy who can stuff takedowns, who can grapple himself, who has insane cardio, who has insane output, who's always pressuring forward. It's literally the same thing as Belal Muhammad. This fight would be the tale of who can do that style better. In my opinion, I think Belal does that pressure heavy, constant output grappling style better than Colby Covington right now, especially that Colby Covington is aging. But if Colby Covington somehow, in some way, gets a title fight versus Belal in the future, I would take Belal, but I don't think I would rule out a strong chance for Colby Covington to get one done over Belal. I mean, you can't argue that Covington will never fight Belal, and that's a fair argument, but if I just had to compare styles and who could beat who, I think Covington has a decent chance of beating Belal, a strong chance at that, but I would still take Belal to beat Covington, even though I think their styles are really similar. And I think Belal would have a really tough time taking down Covington. He would have a tough time pressuring Covington as well. I do think Belal would be successful. He's bigger than Covington. His style is more effective. He has way more output. We've seen in Covington's fights against Usman and against Edwards that he will go on the back foot at times. So I think Belal would be able to impose his will way more than what Colby Covington could do, but there is a chance that Covington could get it done. Maybe his style is better than Belal's. Maybe that style of a grapple heavy and lay and pray and be boring for 5 rounds. Maybe Covington is better at that, but I think currently right now, Belal is just kind of a different breed when it comes to having that style. Maybe I should have put Covington at number 5 or even not on this list entirely, but overall, I think Covington has a pretty decent, just a decent chance of beating Belal Muhammad. But we move on to number 3, and that is Jack Della Maddalena, JDM himself. Now, JDM has a really, really bad issue with takedowns, I believe. I think Belal Muhammad is a nightmare matchup for JDM. However, what JDM does better than what Edwards does is having that dog in him. When JDM fought Gilbert Burns, he was losing on the scorecards. He was getting out grappled. He was definitely losing the fight entirely. But in the last moments, in the last seconds of the fight, he was able to have that dog in him and finish Gilbert Burns. So if anybody could do what Edwards couldn't do, I think it would be JDM. And overall, I think JDM has more power than Edwards. I think JDM has a better style to beat Belal than Edwards. Edwards is very on the back foot, landing low kicks. He does some boxing, but not as much as JDM. I think Belal would be taking more of a risk of getting KO'd versus JDM than versus Edwards. We know JDM's power is different and his boxing is elite, so I don't think Belal could get away with what he did versus Edwards to JDM. I think JDM would punish him more than what Edwards did, which really wasn't anything at all. And maybe if that one uppercut that Edwards did land, if JDM landed that, maybe it would have KO'd Belal. So there's a really good puncher's chance, maybe even more of a puncher's chance for JDM to go out there and just box up Belal. I don't think he'll stuff his takedowns, if I'm being honest with you. I think Belal would probably ragdoll JDM, but I want JDM to win. I want JDM to be champion. I might be a little bit biased in this. I am a JDM fan. I would want JDM to be the next champion. I think he would be, in terms of fighting in the octagon, I think he would be very entertaining and he would be a good champion. Outside of that, obviously his personality isn't the most entertaining at all. Matter of fact, he might be a little bit boring on the microphone. Actually, I think he is boring on the microphone. So that's something JDM probably should work on in the future. But in the octagon, when the fight's happening, JDM is exciting. He gets KOs. He strikes on the feet. He has a good output. He can make a fight really, really exciting. And I think it's more so on his opponents who make it boring. There's really not many or any at all boring JDM fights. So maybe if the UFC, if they want Belal to have an exciting fight, maybe give him JDM. Maybe Belal gets hurt at one point but still wins the fight. That can make the fight overall more entertaining. So maybe if the UFC wants to have a different outlook on Belal and they want him to have a fun performance, maybe giving him JDM can help boost his stock, because I think he does beat JDM. But that fight for Belal is risky. It's very, very dangerous. There's a very high chance he does get KO'd by JDM or just knocked down a bunch of times and loses on points. We'll see how JDM fares in the future. Coming off an arm injury, I believe he broke his arm a while ago. So we'll see how JDM fares in the future. I do think he has a very strong chance of beating Belal. Would I bet on it? No, not taking that bet. I think Belal would find ways to get takedowns and make it boring versus JDM, but maybe JDM will have his moments and he does have a strong chance of possibly KOing Belal. But we move on to number 2 on this list, and you might have to hear me out with this one. I'm taking Kamaru Usman. I think Kamaru Usman, stylistically, is a really, really bad matchup for Belal. They're similar in age, so at that point, it's not really an age argument about Kamaru Usman's too old or Belal's too old because they're around the same age level or they're the same age. But when you break this down style by style, I think Kamaru Usman is kind of a nightmare matchup for Belal Muhammad. A guy who can stuff takedowns, who has a good pace, good cardio, a guy who can pressure forward and has power. Kamaru Usman, the power is the big thing I want to focus on because Kamaru Usman's power is not to be underrated. He could go out there and just flatline Belal Muhammad. He could stuff all of his takedowns and flatline him. Now, do I believe Kamaru Usman would be the best champion, or does he even deserve a title shot at this point because he's come off 2 losses in a row now? No, but I think if Kamaru Usman found his way to fight Belal, and within the next year or two, I think Kamaru Usman has one of the strongest chances of beating Belal just by having the style that he has. I don't think Belal is going to have that much success taking down Kamaru Usman. If it's on the feet, we might see Belal pressure forward, but I think Kamaru Usman can land just one punch or just a few punches and maybe make Belal not want to pressure as much because the power of Kamaru Usman is just too dangerous just to go in there and do what he did against Leon and just wing shots, don't care about getting chinned. You're not going to get chinned by Edwards because he felt his power already. He knew Edwards couldn't KO him. But with Kamaru Usman, if he lands one good hard punch on Belal, he might not want to pressure forward as much. It was the same thing for Belal against Luque. When Luque landed on Belal's chin, he knew he could get hurt by him. He knew he could get dropped by him and finished. So when he fought Luque, he more so was on the back foot, going for takedowns at times, just trying to overall stall out the fight. And when it comes to Kamaru Usman, I think it might be the same thing. I think if Kamaru Usman lands one good shot, we're going to see Belal go on the back foot, and maybe Kamaru Usman from that point on can dominate the fight. Now, do I think Belal Muhammad beats Kamaru Usman? Yes, I think his pace is too much. I think at this point he is really overconfident. I think his confidence will carry him against Kamaru Usman, where Usman right now, his confidence is probably at an all-time low. But in terms of just overall style, I do think Kamaru Usman has one of the strongest chances of beating Belal. I don't like Kamaru Usman. I'm not a Kamaru Usman fan at all, but I have to acknowledge that the style matchup is very, very dangerous for Belal Muhammad. Now, moving on to our final fighter. This fighter, I believe, has the best chance of beating Belal Muhammad, and that, of course, is Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now listen, I've been hearing this narrative about Shavkat that he's a boring fighter and that he won't be entertaining to watch versus Belal. Let's stop that real quick. Shavkat has only had one boring fight in the UFC so far, and that was his most recent fight. There's too much recency bias going along with Shavkat that he's boring, and I think his name ending in a V might pertain to that. But let's be real here, Shavkat has only had one boring fight in the UFC, and that was against Wonderboy. But before that, he fought Jeff Neal in a fight of the year contender when he fought Colston Harris, spinning wheel kick TKO. Shavkat is not boring. Let's quit that narrative. Shavkat can be entertaining. He had one lame fight, which I think he did break something. I think he broke his foot in that matchup as well. So let's just cut him some slack. I'm not biased in this in any way. I'm not even a Shavkat fan. I'm kind of indifferent to him, but he's not boring. But when it comes to him versus Belal Muhammad, I think he has a very, very strong chance of beating him. I think he takes qualities that I mentioned of JDM and Kamaru Usman. Now, the qualities that he takes from JDM, I think is just the boxing. I think his boxing, Shavkat's boxing, is really, really good. I think he has very technical boxing. Maybe his defense when it comes on the feet isn't the best. We saw Jeff Neal tag him a lot, but that proves that he has a good chin as well. And the qualities that I think he takes from Usman, I think, is the power and the grappling. Now, I'll say this real quick. We don't know how good Shavkat's takedown defense truly is just yet. Don't quote me on this, but I think on the regional scene, he did fight a guy who did shoot takedowns against him, and he didn't fare too well. I mean, he still ended up KOing the guy, obviously, but he kind of got, I wouldn't say exposed, but it seemed like his takedown defense might have been lacking. Now, obviously, that fight was years ago up until now, so maybe since time has passed, he has improved, but his grappling offense is pretty damn good. And let's not pretend here that Belal Muhammad didn't have his whole back taken by Leon Edwards throughout round 3, that Edwards wasn't reversing position quite consistently in pretty much every single round versus Belal. So Belal is open to being taken down and controlled, and Shavkat can very well do that himself. And when it comes to being purely on the feet, I think Shavkat is a way better striker than Belal, and I don't think Belal offers anything in terms of power to really threaten Shavkat to hurt him. We saw again against Jeff Neal that Shavkat's chin can hold up very, very well against a power puncher in Jeff Neal, so I don't think Belal can go out there and get a one-punch KO knockout over Shavkat unless his chin is just secretly awful and somehow Jeff Neal has no power. So in terms of style and matchup, I do think Shavkat has the best chance of beating Belal Muhammad. Now, can Belal go out there and possibly expose Shavkat for having bad takedown defense? Of course, that is possible, but I don't think Shavkat has been doing absolutely nothing to improve his grappling defense for the past how many years just to get outgrappled by Belal. I think at the very least, if things do get dicey for Shavkat on the feet and in the grappling defense, I think he can go for takedowns of his own and find ways to control Belal. Now, do I think that will happen? I don't know. Hopefully we do see Belal versus Shavkat next. I wouldn't mind that matchup. I do think Shavkat should fight JDM first. I don't really care though. If the UFC wants to get the belt off of Belal as soon as possible, then just go ahead and give him Shavkat and just maybe he does beat him. I think Shavkat should fight a 5-rounder in the UFC before he fights Belal, because I don't think we've seen Shavkat in a 5-rounder just yet, or him go the full 5 rounds at the very, very least. So I do think he should probably fight JDM in a 5-rounder. You possibly could put that on a main card of a pay-per-view that is main card worthy. So maybe they might do a 3-rounder versus JDM. Maybe they might give him Belal outright. I don't know what they're going to do. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we don't know how good Shavkat's 5-round cardio is. We know he has good 3-round cardio. Obviously, that fight with Jeff Neal proves that. So when it comes to Shavkat, there are some question marks that we don't have answered just yet. And maybe Belal can be the first person to ever expose that on Shavkat in the UFC. Do I believe that Belal will be able to do that? I don't know. Possibly, like, this fight can kind of go two ways. Maybe Belal, just his style is just too dominant for anybody to really defend against it, or maybe the age and the style of Belal finally catches up to him and he can't take down Shavkat, and maybe Shavkat's the one taking him down. And if not that, on the feet, Shavkat is just way better than Belal is. So maybe in the future, we'll see how this fight does play out. I think right now, I would say I might be leaning towards Shavkat, but I wouldn't put Belal down in any sort of way. He could go out there and just completely mess up Shavkat throughout 5 rounds. We'll see what happens in the future, but I think I would personally take Shavkat currently to beat Belal, but it is very iffy. The fight should be even on odds, I think, in my opinion. So there you guys go. That was my top 5 fighters in the UFC who I believe have a good chance or a solid chance of beating Belal Muhammad. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell icon for notifications. I'll see y'all later. Peace.